All right, guys, it's a lovely, brisk winter day on 18 January 2024. It's great to be with you both. And we're going to shake things up differently today. I want to start asking Marilyn some questions. So, Marilyn,
Oh, by the way, let me say happy
Derl.
birthday.
Thank you. Is it Marilyn's birthday?
He's an old guy. He's 30 now.
I'm 30 now. It's crazy. It's faster than I thought it was going to. It's shocking. So
Yeah.
now out of my 20s now. So, Marilyn, what's your perspective during Operation Buffalo? You're seeing this in the news, you're reading about it. What's going through your mind being at home?
Well, there was a lot of fear, seeing and reading in the newspaper and seeing on the news. As you remember, we only had TV news morning and evening, but it was very stressful to not know. But thankfully, Derl wrote me a letter that night that I received earlier than normal. So that was reassuring. I knew that he was okay.
Absolutely. Well, I know you and Derl and I, we've talked about seeing the photographs of the tanks bringing back the dead of Bravo 19 and this engagement. And for you, thousands of miles at home, that has to be heart-wrenching, not knowing that this is your husband's company. This is what's happening right now.
I think the not knowing is the hardest part because, you can imagine all kinds of things from injuries to death, and I'm pregnant and I'm thinking I may be a single mom, at the rate this is going. And the battle went on, for several days past when Derl was involved. So we're seeing those and they're showing us that footage, on TV of them trying to recover the dead Marines. So that was really, it was so sad. And, I look back on it and think about my mom and dad. They were there watching what I was going through as well as what they were going through because I had a brother there in Vietnam as well. Mm-hmm. So it was just a difficult time.
Well, and that's one of the unique aspects, as both of you know, about Vietnam, of the media. You were able to watch the war at home on the 5 o'clock news just because it was brought to your doorstep.
Yes. True. Yes. And then when you have family that are there, that adds another element to the news because you're always, in fact, the day that Operation Buffalo happened, I happened to be at my grandmother's sorting through our stuff because we, I just come back home and we were using her home as a storage. And when I came home at lunch, 2 of our friends were there because they had seen the news earlier that morning and they had come over to see how I was doing. They realized I didn't know about it yet and they didn't say anything. They just visited and left. So it was in the evening before I knew, we had the newspaper and we had the, the TV reports.
Good old Walter Cronkite.
Yeah.
Well, and I know too, in passing, Aaron, we've talked that you get a Western Union telegram that you refuse to even let the man bring you, let alone look at until, if I'm not mistaken, your father or mother was home, correct?
Right. It was almost lunchtime when he came. And, I knew that people had received death telegrams and I just could not even take the telegram. I just told him to wait until my family was there and then we'd take it and that they would be there shortly because it was almost lunchtime. But sitting there waiting, that was probably one of the hardest times. My heart was just broken because I was fearful of what they were going to tell me. But fortunately, it was just a late message of what had happened on July 2nd.
That I'd already told her about in the letter.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and with that, that has to provide you some relief. But at the same time, Derl's still in the country and he still has a tour to finish. So what's it like knowing that this awful operation has happened to Derl and his company, but he's also not done? How does that feel?
it's hard. It's very hard. It's very stressful. You know, it's just like anxiety. And I think that's probably where my faith came in, because I just began to pray about it continually. We were praying for Derl, and the Lord just seemed to give me a peace about it. I felt that Derl was going to come home. I just had that inner feeling that he would come home. He wasn't positive about that.
She neglected to tell me.
But, when you're pregnant, you have a lot of emotions anyway. But to add that to him being in battle, and I knew he was in battle because, he was telling me where he was, a little bit about what was going on, not a whole lot.
Yeah, I never did explain in detail.
Right.
But just enough that she'd know where we were and a little bit about what was going on.
And the letters were coming back with that red mud on them, like it had dried, but they were nasty looking envelopes. And I remember Mother just always saying, be sure you wash your hands after you read your letters, because I knew he was in the field. He wasn't in a nice place, Yes,
ma'am. Well, and to change this on a lighter note for you, Marilyn, I know you sent Derl a lot of letters, but did you send him any packages from home, any like canned goods, cookies, things like that?
Yes, that was just kind of a regular. We did that on a regular basis. We were sending packages. And I think we've mentioned before that his mom and sisters and, my family, we were all sending things. Even friends at church, they were sending letters. They were sending goodies as well, weren't they?
They sent me a lot of cookie crumbs. After 3 weeks in course or 4, they got a little bit crumbly, but they were good.
And we got to where we knew to pack them with popcorn, and that helped. We learned some things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For you, Marilyn, it has to be comforting knowing that this is the community that's supporting your husband that is fighting for thousands of miles away. That to know that if something did happen, you still got the support of the people around you.
That's right. And to have a wonderful family, I had my brothers and my aunts and uncles, and I had lots of friends, at church, as well as just people that I had worked with, so there was a lot of support.
Well, and to flip this to Derl now, what does it feel like to have this support? Not just your wife, but you've got family members, church members, friends that are sending you letters. How does that make you feel?
It made me feel great most of the time, because I had buddies over there that didn't get hardly anything. And I would share the goodies that I got. And but they were not getting letters because some of them didn't get along with their family members. That's the reason they were there. You heard the story where the guys joined the Marines to get away from their parents, and they got harder parents. But yeah, it was really rewarding for me. And the guys that didn't get, they loved to hear, things, what was going on back home. So I was always sharing that as well, what I knew, what I gained from the letters.
Well, and we were sending pictures back and forth, and things like that. So, and the reel-to-reel tapes. So we still even have those, where he's describing what's going on.
Yeah, that was really. I carried a little tape player about this big. Well, not this big. And she had one here, and so we'd send them, back and forth. And she'd make a tape, and she'd have the family, and my family, her family, all say something. So that really helped a lot, just to get a touch of home, And, it was rewarding.
I've seen that in the movie Hamburger Hill that came out in the 80s. There's a scene where some paratroopers are listening to that in Vietnam, but this is the first time of anybody I've interviewed that's mentioned this. So how long could these messages be on the reel to reel?
About maybe 30 minutes.
Yeah. They weren't very big, just little round reels. And like I said, we still have them today. I think it'd be kind of fun to get them transferred
Yeah.
so we could listen to them.
Yeah, because they don't sound too good. They're kind of staticky.
Well, and still though, that's amazing though, that from 20 years prior in World War II, as both of you know, people are writing letters to now in Vietnam, you can send reel to reel and hear each other's voice from thousands of miles away. I mean, that's got to be morale lifting. It's got to be boosting and good for the soul in itself.
That's right. It is. The downsides to it is I didn't carry it with me all the time, but when we were back at a little base or something where, well, our home base, then I could dig it out and listen to whatever she had sent in the previous weeks. And that wasn't very often because we didn't go back very often, but it really made my day.
Now that's still, it's incredible though, just for what you guys were able to achieve in terms of communication during this time. I mean, I just find that utterly fascinating.
We didn't really get to talk to each other until I was on R&R, but the letters were really comforting, and the tapes.
Well, and with the letters and the tapes and the goodies that you get, did you share the goodies with the Marines around you who didn't get anything?
Oh yeah, yeah. We all shared with each other. You know, whoever got anything, it was for our mortar section, and so we just, it didn't last very long.
Well, getting back with our timeline now, after Operation Buffalo, what's the process for Bravo 19? How quickly do replacements start filling the gaps of the dead and the wounded?
Well, pretty soon we, of course, we were back at Conti Inn, and of course that's not a very fun place to be to start with. I was there 3 different times, and but we were stationed there, and we were just kind of waiting around, doing duty on the lines and stuff, and making our bunkers stronger, and we after, I don't know, about probably a couple of weeks, we had like 75 replacements. So we were back up to over 100, you know, pretty soon. And so we're back in the field. We're still short, and we're a new company pretty much, except for 26 of us.
Well, I mean, to think about that math real quick, that's 26% of the company out of approximately 100 Marines are combat veterans. The rest of them in itself have no experience. Being a veteran, how does that feel knowing that you are a new company again?
It's pretty scary because you don't know how these guys are going to react until you're in battle. And most of them do okay, but they are experienced, and it takes a lot of learning, you know, to just to kind of know how to react and what to do when it happens. And we felt responsible for getting them trained, because I mean, they may be trained better than we are when they get there, but not for jungle warfare. So we'd work on that quite a bit.
Well, and then with the replacements, how long were they with you before you finally started doing patrols and combat operations?
It was probably about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks. Then we were back in the field, doing our different operations. I think our next one was Hastings, I believe. And but we were during our time at Conti Inn, and we'd end up back at Conti Inn. This is the second time I was there, and we'd end up back there in October.
Well,
we all took turns.
Being at Conti Inn, I mean, I've interviewed a lot of Marines who were there towards the latter part of 67. A lot of artillery, a lot of mortar barrages that come in constantly. What's that like in that situation?
It's just it's get real scary, but you kind of get used to it in a way. You know, you think, oh, more are coming. We better get in our bunker or whatever. You know, I remember one day we were there, and I was so dirty and tired of it, and I needed to shave. And so we had a little slack period, and I'm thinking, I'm going to get out here and shave and clean up. So I got my pot and mirror and everything and got out, set it up. And as soon as I got it set up, I heard just thump, 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 thump. The mortars were coming. And so I ran back in the bunker. And as soon as it lit up a little bit again, I went out to get my stuff. There was no stuff there. The mortars had been hitting everywhere and they'd blown everything away.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was just constant, pretty much.
Well, and with that too, I mean, that's a pretty close brush with death again for you as well. I mean, just a mortar barrage and you're back into the bunkers, but your stuff's blown away.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was pretty much daily, and we'd have trouble having our food and water that we needed. You know, it was risky to go anywhere to get anything. I remember we had in the early mornings, we had a mud hole right out in front of our bunkers, and we'd go out there early and fill up our canteens before the tanks came, because the tanks would go right through there, and then it's just a muddy mess. So that we had to be aware of when we could do and what we could do.
Well, and with that, you know, you've got all of the tanks, you've got Contian being shelled. So when the tanks come through, does that attract more mortar and artillery fire from the NVA?
Yeah, it does. And the helicopters was the worst is for attracting. But I mean, they were necessary. They're what brought our food and water and ammunition in and took out our dead and wounded. So they just had to keep on coming. But yeah, it would draw a lot of fire every time they came. So they didn't stay long. Whatever they had, they kicked it out, and we threw the dead and wounded on, and they're gone.
Right.
And we're back in the bunker until that barrage kind of pauses, and then we're out firing back into that area.
Well, and I was just about to ask, you know, once the NVA stopped mortaring, then do you mortar back and attempt to try to knock out their mortar sections?
Exactly. And we were always excited when we'd have a secondary explosion because we knew we had a hit. That's kind of the way that we knew that we had one.
Now, with that, being at Contian, how much mortar ammo would be in the mortar pits compared to general operations?
A lot more, because we'd get boxes of them in, and we'd of course unbox them and we'd have them ready. And we also used those boxes at our bunker. We'd fill them back up with dirt and then stack them on our bunker just to give us more, hopefully, to where they would take a direct hit. And I mean, we'd put boxes of dirt and sandbags just one after the other. We'd have like 6, 7 stacks on top of us. And it really did help. So sometimes, I don't remember us taking a direct hit, but they hit so close you could almost call it that. But we did have a lot of direct hits on others. You know, with them coming in constantly, they're going to be hitting.
Now, with the direct hits as well, were those causing pretty significant casualties within the perimeter of Contian?
Oh yeah, we had casualties just constantly. Like I say, the pretty much daily or every other day or so, the choppers were in picking them up and bringing more supplies.
Well, and as a mortarman, and this is what I found in my research, is that the NVA used 61 millimeter mortars, and for instead of 81 millimeters that the Marines had, they also used 82s. So the rounds are bigger. And
Yeah.
with that, I mean, you've got the constant artillery, you've got the constant barrages, you've got shrapnel, dead and wounded. How do you keep your sanity? How do you keep your morale up?
Some didn't. It was very difficult. It really was, because pretty soon you're just thinking, well, it really didn't matter. You know, you got to work at it. Really, we had guys that pretty much just went off the deep end after so many days and weeks and some even months there with that. Yeah, it was hard.
Well, with your experience and being you saw it what happens for a Marine that goes off the deep end, that loses it? Do they get taken out of the field? What's the process?
Well, some do. In most cases, they finally will come around, you know, get hold of it, get hold of themselves. But you know, it's like I guess a stress or anxiety attack that you just feel like you can't handle it anymore, and after a few hours or days in the bunker, then you kind of come around again. I never experienced that. I've seen guys that did. I don't know how, but I guess I kind of kept my sanity. I think because I had more to live for than a lot of them. You know, some of them didn't have really anything back home, and some of them had received letters from their girlfriends and their wives telling them that they're done. You know, and that probably caused more of it than the actual bombing.
Well, and as well, I mean, I know that you definitely saw this when you were in country. How often would you have Marines getting, Dear John letters about girlfriends, wives, or fiancés leaving them?
Well, it wasn't an everyday thing. I'd say maybe I witnessed 3 or 4, but I knew it was happening.
And how do combat Marines handle that? Because people vision combat Marines as these rough, hardened, killers, and rightfully so in many ways they are. They've trained that way, but you also have the emotional stress of the person you love the most is gone. How do they handle that?
It's very difficult. You know, it's hard just to handle a death in the family, but I think it may be harder to handle being deserted. You know, from those back home, your family's back home. But thankfully, I didn't have that. I had a pretty good gal waiting on me.
Yeah, still here today. I mean, it's
Yeah.
even part of our interview today, and I'm very thankful for Marilyn's perspective.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. She kept me alive. I think I tell her she prayed me back home.
well, after being in Contian, training up the new recruits, you go out on this operation. So Operation Buffalo was your last operation, and we know how that went. So what was it like on this new operation? How do you feel?
Well, it was just back to normal stuff. General Westmoreland wanted to sweep from Camp Carroll to out along the DMZ, and can't think of the name, but anyway, out in that area. And so that took probably, I don't know, a week at least, maybe more. And we had to go back. We had to go. Well, we went to our home base, and then we went back to Camp Carroll to make that sweep. And then we ended up at Contian again. But that was a long sweep. We didn't accomplish a whole lot. We did destroy a lot of bunkers and captured a few enemy. There wasn't any major battles, but there was snipers that we had to deal with pretty much daily, and it was just a hot, dirty time. You know, just trudging along, checking out everything, blowing up stuff, and anytime we encountered the enemy, we were at full force, so we could pretty well take them out. It wasn't just our company; it was a division thing, and so we had tanks and everything that we needed at that time.
Well, being with tanks in the field, what is that like operating with tanks around you? I mean, how does the Marine Corps do combined arms with tanks and infantry support?
But we never had many tanks. I think maybe the most we ever had were 2. But it's kind of a safer feeling because you got more support, and they would be in areas around us, not necessarily right where we were, and when we needed them, they were pretty handy to have because they had a lot of firepower. They really did.
Well, that and I mean, any kind of bunker complexes or ambushes, I mean, the tanks are there to lay down significant heavy covering fire.
Right, right. And we were in this one area where they were having elections. And so we were kind of there to protect them, the South Vietnam. And we were just encamped there all around this little city area. And I remember one night we were there and we were dug in, and I had my fixing my coffee and my cigarettes, you know, just kind of taking it easy, and we heard the mortars coming, and we also heard fire coming, and we had our not really bunkers, we just had dug our foxholes, and so jumped in our foxholes. And when I come out, my good coffee and everything, my coffee was full of dirt, and my cigarettes too. So it wasn't a good evening for food. But just incidents like that went on quite a bit.
Well, and with protecting the elections, were the elections able to go on successfully with 19 operating in the area?
Yeah, they did. I don't know if you'd call it a success or not, but enough to where we moved on, you know, eventually. Yeah.
So as 1967 rolls on, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, that you eventually get into Operation Kentucky, is that correct?
I don't remember Kentucky. Kingfisher.
Now, I definitely remember Kingfisher, and I've done some research on Kingfisher.
Okay, well, there was several. I'm just
Well, I mean, with these operations, I mean, they start building, but at the same time, you know, you're starting to get shorter in Vietnam. So were you keeping track of your short timers calendar of when you were going to return to the United States?
Oh yeah, always, every day. I carried a little calendar I could mark off when I had a chance. And yeah, we went from there. We went to a little place called D5, where we were actually there with the South Vietnamese army, and they had cement bunkers that had been there for ever since the last war. And but the thing about them, they were dark and moldy and rats, and you know, so when we got there, we found this one that just had a tin covering over it. And we thought, well, we'll just go in there and sleep the night. We got in there, it was dark, and all we could hear was rustling. And so somebody lit a match, and we could just see rats running everywhere. And it reached the point to where we'd go in there with our bayonets and have bayonet practice with the rats. And just, you know, crazy stuff like that. And then our C rations started disappearing. We couldn't figure out what was happening to our C rations. And we thought maybe it's the rats. But then we thought, well, rats don't carry them off a box at a time. And so we actually ran out of food. And the ARVN were coming around asking us for food. I said, hey guys, we're out of food. We don't have any. Something's been happening to our food. And so they said, well, we'll see you later. So they went off out in the bush somewhere and came back carrying bananas and greenery and stuff, you know, and they're sharing with us. And they even come back with some of our C rations that they had stolen from us and shared with us.
Well, speaking of the ARVN being there, what's your opinion of the ARVN? You worked with them, you saw them. What's your personal take?
They were not very dependable, at least the ones that we were around. There were some, I made friends with some of them and tried to talk their language, you know, and all, they tried to talk our language. But as far as battle, they were not they were kind of hard to be found whenever there was something serious going on. They really, I don't think they wanted to be a part of it, but they were forced into it. And probably not all of them are that way, I'm sure, but most of the ones that I was around, they really didn't want to be involved in it. But like I say, they were forced to be there and forced to do whether they wanted to or not.
Well, and with that as well, working with the ARVN and knowing that they're stealing your C rations, did that make any of the relations difficult there at D5 between the Marines and the ARVN?
Well, it did create a little problem, but my thinking was, hey, these guys are stealing from us, but when they realize that we don't have anything, they're willing to share, even though it's our stuff.
Now, when they bring the bananas back, and what was it like to share a meal of bananas with Marines and ARVN?
Well, it was different. We couldn't talk very much, you know. They talked to themselves, we talked to ourselves, and we just, you know, share stuff. And I remember one day they had a chicken, and they were cutting up this chicken, and they asked me, said, "Hey, you want to share?" You know, and I said, "Yeah, sounds good." And so they chopped up cleaned the chicken, chopped it up, looked real good, putting it in the pot, and then they laid out the entrails and started chopping them up and throwing them in the pot. And I'm saying, well, I think I'm being called. I need to go. I went and found my C rations. Chicken looked good, but not with entrails in it, you know.
Well, I was about to ask, did you eat any authentic Vietnamese food when you were in country?
Actually, I don't remember being able to do that because we were not in the village areas, like some were privileged to be. I do not remember eating their food other than that incident.
And we clearly see that you passed on that, you know.
Yeah, it probably would have been good if I hadn't seen what all they put in it.
So how long were you at D5 with the ARVN?
We were there probably, I'm going to guess about 3 weeks, because we got pretty comfortable there, you know, just on watch and doing stuff. And we were there long enough to where we had a trash pit where we had to run the Vietnamese kids off, because they'd come through it, plunder through it, find what they could that we had not used. And we had one of the ARVN, he just went nuts, went out there firing his rifle and scaring the kids off. And we had to have a serious talk with him, you know. He can't be doing that. But anyway, we didn't care because they needed probably whatever was there. And yeah, we got along with them fine. And the duties there were just pretty much on watch. We had one day, we had one of the Vietnamese coming up, and he was asking, we didn't know what he was asking, but he was just almost like he was begging. And so finally we realized he was needing help of some kind. And his family was sick. And so we let one of our corpsmen and a couple of guys go and check it out, and they'd had some kind of virus, and he gave them some pills or whatever, and then they came back and everybody was okay. Just crazy incidents.
Well, I think some of those crazy incidents are necessary for the story to know of the good things that indeed did happen in Vietnam between U.S. forces and locals in itself. I mean, you know, it's one of the beautiful things about an ugly conflict of Marines helping out local villagers to try to make sure that they're safe, that they're being taken care of, just because, you know, at the end of the day, you're humans. You know, it's their
Right.
thing to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I say, our company got along with them all right. We just had to be careful and watch that they didn't steal whatever we had, and not depend on them, you know, because they were not that dependable.
So from D5, where does that take, you know, Derl Horn? Where do you go next?
I think we went from there to where do we go?
I don't know.
Let me see here. I've written down a thing or two here. Anyway, I think we went from there. We went from there to a place called the Rock Crusher. It's where they crushed up rocks to make roads, and we were there to protect them. And me and my we had actually had 3 mortars at that position. And by this time I was a section leader, and so I stationed 2 mortars down below, one along the river and one on the other side, and then we had one on top of the hill, and that's where I was. And we were there for a few weeks, and it was pretty hard, because being up on the hill and then having mortar groups down below that you're in charge of, and I spent more of my time up on the hill, and we received a lot of incoming there, and we received a lot of small arms fire. But the problem was, there we had to get permission before we could fire back, because they were considered no fire zones. And it was crazy, because by the time we got permission, they weren't there anymore. So that was one of the drawbacks in Vietnam. I mean, that wasn't everywhere, but there were some locations where they called it no fire zones. And and actually that's when I found out about the birth of my daughters. Was I was called down off of the hill. They had a radio call for me, and took me about 30 minutes to get off that hill, because it's real steep. And when I got down there, they were holding it for me, and when they answered it, I was expecting some kind of orders from wherever, you know. But this guy, he told me, he said, "I'm so and so, and I just wanted to let you know that your wife and daughters are fine." And it kind of took me back, you know. I said, "You telling me my wife and daughters, plural, you know?" And he said, "Yeah, you have twin daughters, and they're doing great." And this was what, about 2.5 weeks after they were born. Yeah.
Wow.
This was December 3, I think, and they were born in November 21. Yeah, December 3. Yeah.
Well, and for you, I mean, that's approximately the halfway point of your tour, of your 10-month tour, right?
Yeah, a little over. Yeah.
Well, now that you know that you've got 2 healthy daughters, what does that do emotionally for you? I mean, now you've got the aspect of you're starting to get shorter, but you've also got 2 beautiful daughters at home. What goes through your mind?
I'm thinking I really got to be cautious, you know, because I want to get back home and see those girls and see my wife again. And it does put a strain on you. And I would catch myself thinking about home too much. And I'd have to talk to myself, you know, you got to keep your mind on what you're doing here. And because I'd get rude awakenings sometimes, you know, with the mortars coming in or sporadic gunfire. And it was difficult. And I mean, I was happy about it. It was quite a surprise, something neither one of us expected. But you know, that same day that I found out, I got the call that evening at mail call. I got letters from my mother-in-law telling me about the babies and a picture of them. and also I got a box of cigars from my father-in-law. And so, I mean, we had a smoking good time. I mean, the VC and NBA probably could tell right where we were. But it was a fun time doing that, and realizing, hey, yeah, I'm finally a dad, not only with one but two.
Double the trouble.
Yeah, I was, and it makes me more anxious to get home. I'm thinking, I'm going on R&R. I wonder if I could get a flight on home.
Well,
of course, that was just a thought. I knew it wouldn't work.
Well, to add to this too, I want to go back to something you said that I think is important, is that you can't think about home too much, simply for the fact of you have to keep your edge, because if you lose that mentality that I'm in a combat zone and I have a job to do, that can get people around you killed, but it could also get you killed.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was weighing on my mind real heavy. You know, I've got to keep my mind on what I'm doing here. And it's hard to do. It's hard to do.
Well, and as a mortar section leader, you now have more responsibilities as well, correct?
Right. Yes. A mortar section leader is normally at least a lieutenant, and we never had that. We did have a sergeant for a while, and here I'm just a corporal, and I'm the section leader for the rest of my tour until I go home. So yeah.
So as a section leader, what are some of your responsibilities now?
Well, I had to make sure we had our mortars stationed at the right places. Had to watch out for my guys. Some of them I felt like needed a promotion. They'd been there, quite a while, and they were like privates, PFCs, Lance Corporals, and they were doing an exceptional job. So I went to bat for them and got some of them promoted. Just looking out for them, trying to treat everybody the same, and always having the position our mortars to where in the best positions to protect whatever was going on there at the time, and trying to have enough ammo always. And we kind of took care of that problem early on. I think I told you we all tried to carry our own ammo. Excuse me. And finally, we talked them into letting just all of the platoons carry one round with their other stuff. They had plenty of stuff to carry too. And that way, instead of carrying 5 or 6, we could cut ours down to 3 or 4, and we'd have plenty of rounds. They'd just come by and drop them off or wherever we were stopping for the evening or days, or wherever. And that really helped supplying us, and it helped them too when they needed us. Well, so they were willing.
I was going to chime in. I mean, you got 100 guys in the company per se. The mortar section's carrying 3 to 4, but you've got one spread around the platoons. You've got over 120, 130 mortar rounds ready at any given point.
Right. Yeah. We had a nice stack.
Definitely.
And we were just and we didn't want a direct hit on them either. So that was a little bit scary, trying to figure out where to put them where that would be safe. And usually it would be like in the bunker or somewhere underground, or at least under the level of the ground.
Well, and as we go through this timeline, you're a section leader now you're a dad, and you mentioned, you've got R&R coming up. So when was your R&R scheduled?
Actually, I got to go on R&R to Da Nang, China Beach. That's where some people were stationed, but I got to go there on in-country R&R, I think 3 or 4 days. But later in November, I got to go to Hong Kong on real R&R for I think 5 days, and that was really nice. It made me realize it's kind of nice not to have mortars and rockets and gunfire coming your way. And it was, and I got to call home while I was in Hong Kong and talk to my wife. And we had one of our daughters was home. The other one was still in the hospital because she was so small. And I told Marilyn I wanted to hear our baby, and I think she must have pinched her or something. She started
Yeah.
crying.
Yeah,
Mm,
it's fun. It's
yeah.
fun for you to get to hear.
Yeah, it was. It was
Well,
real rewarding.
I'm gonna bring Marilyn in real quick because I think this
Okay.
is important. What's it like getting a phone call from Derl when he's on R&R, finally being able to have a
It
wonderful.
was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I was so thrilled. You know, you only have a little bit of time because phone calls weren't like they are today. And, you know, just trying to find out things about him and him wanting to know things about me. You know, you're trying to tell each other everything you can in that little short length of time. And I went and got Cindy and brought her to the phone and kind of, you know, shook her so that she would cry a little bit. And, you know, it just went really fast, but it was such a wonderful feeling to know that you'd actually heard his voice. I mean, what more could you ask for? I mean, it just made us, I think, both more homesick.
Mhm.
It was right before Christmas, and
Oh,
just knowing we're getting close, but that we still got, you know, at least a month and a half left or
Right.
more,
Yeah.
couple of months.
Yeah. Yeah, and those calls, you know, they're short and they're expensive. And I call collect.
I'm sure mother and dad paid for that call. But there was some sad things about that time too, with about your mom and dad.
Yeah, got a letter from my mom. She had filed for divorce. My dad, of course, they had not been getting along or even being together for quite a while. But just getting that letter, realizing that they're parting ways for good, and being 10,000 miles away, and not being able to be there to comfort them, or you know, to do anything, couldn't do anything other than write a note home. But
Pray for them.
yeah, put them in my prayers, and it was a hard thing. It really was.
well,
It didn't help my morale any.
I was about to say that has to be an emotional roller coaster, knowing that you've got two beautiful baby daughters, but also knowing that, you know, their grandparents, your mom and dad, they're getting divorced.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It was a difficult thing. It really was. Yeah. And but I'm just overjoyed to have my wife and daughters doing good, you know, and still.
Well, and to speak of this, you know, what's it like for you to hear your wife's voice and also to hear the cry of your daughter?
Oh my gosh. It made, like I say, it made me want to hop on a jet. But yeah, it was very, very, very exciting. It really was. Made my day, made my week. But it does give you a sadness, just realizing that, you know, you hear them, but you can't be near them, you can't touch them, you know. And I think about that today with our military guys. You know, they're easy accessible with their cell phones and all, but there's no touching. You know, there's not, you can't be near, you just see, like we're seeing you right now.
Well, to get your opinion, Derl, because I think this is an interesting point I didn't think about. Do you think it would be more difficult to make that call today when you can see each other face to face, or was it easier to do it with just the voices?
I think it would make you, I don't know. I think today it might be harder actually, because you can see them every day, but you can't be there. Whereas in Vietnam, I mean, I didn't forget about it, but it wasn't something that controlled my mind every day, you know, because you're busy doing everything else. And there are times, but if I could talk to her daily, I'm not sure. We have to let Marilyn talk.
No.
But yeah, it was a really fun time hearing my wife and daughters. It really was.
Well, and with that, you're on R&R. How did you find Hong Kong? I mean, you get to make this phone call home. You're in a new place. What were your thoughts on Hong Kong in itself?
Hong Kong was it was a great escape. I mean, I had a bed, I had showers, I had food. I'd go to a restaurant and eat. And I did a lot of shopping. I had a tailor-made suit made and sent home. And I bought a movie camera, a Super 8 movie camera. And I filmed Hong Kong, and there was a little boy there that followed me around, and he was always trying to sell me something. He'd say, "My mother's a virgin," that kind of stuff. But he was good. I would let him take my camera, and he'd film me walking around the streets, and then I could send it home. And I sent the camera and the videos home to my wife. And I kind of wish I'd have kept it, but I don't know if it would have survived, because I could have gotten a lot of footage. But I probably did the right thing sending it home. And I remember Marilyn, the first time she used it, our one daughter that was home, she was videoing, and she had used the whole film up.
On our sleeping.
Yeah. So we were kind of new at it at the time. But it's still, I still like to see it. We still have it.
I was about to ask. I mean, that's incredible. I've interviewed a lot of combat photographers and correspondents who were with the 1st Marine Division, and they all have their photographs, their notebooks, and I always find that fascinating of what you keep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we have gobs of photographs and videos of our family, and early on, whenever I came back, we did a lot of video, and then I transferred all of the VHS tapes to DVDs, and well, I went from the reel to reel to VHS to DVDs. And I think whenever I transferred to DVDs, I had like, I don't know, 150 VHSs, and they all have like 2 hours on them.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
It's a great family record. I mean,
oh yeah, it is.
Well, to go back to Hong Kong, I know what happened with your Vietnamese food experience at D5. Did you find the food in Hong Kong better?
Yeah, and I even had shrimp there, and I've been thinking about that. I thought, well, I didn't get sick, but actually I did get a little bit sick, because I went back to my room, and I was supposed to have I was supposed to meet for a what do you call it? Show me around,
A tour.
A tour the next morning, and I overslept and missed it. So then I had to reschedule it for later in the day, and got to go to a high-rise restaurant, and got to go out on a boat out to a floating restaurant, and pick out my food out of the tub that they had there. Do you want that fish or that one? And that was pretty neat. It was a good time there. I enjoyed it. Of course, it wasn't like being at home, but it was great being out of the battlefield. I'll tell you for sure. Yeah, I could crawl into bed at night and not worry about it. Of course, I still had dreams and all, but it wasn't like being there. And then on my way back, I had gotten pictures, and I had some money in my wallet, and I was sleeping in a cot at an airport, and somebody stole my pictures and some of my money. I could not, but why would they want my pictures, you know? But I spent my Christmas in a terminal on a cot. That was on my way back to the field. Yeah, but yeah, it was a great time in Hong Kong. It really was.
Well, to get to, I think that a good point to slowly end out our interview today. What's it like going back to Vietnam? What's the process of now I have to leave R&R, go to the terminal, back through the process? What's the check-in like back in country?
Well, it was pretty well set up where we just had to check in, you know, and board our flights because it was set up for us. And we when we got to the main place, then we had to have a C-130 haul us out. Then we had to go on the chopper and chopper it out to the field. And as soon as I got off the helicopter, they're firing at us. You know, and I'm thinking, boy, I wish I was back in Hong Kong.
Like give you one heck of a welcome reception back to country.
Yeah, they did, and didn't take me long to find a hole to get into, and then of course all the guys, they want to know all about R&R, all about Hong Kong. You know, that was a big deal. Or anytime anybody went somewhere, we wanted to know all about how it went, you know, and what did you do, and but yeah, we were at a little hill, I think Hill 51 outside of Camp Carroll at that time, and then we were transferred over near Wade. They were bringing in helicopters with the local people, and they were dumping them off, and then we were hopping back on the chopper, and they were telling us to be ready because when we land, you're going to be fired at. And so we were all ready, and as soon as the choppers didn't really land, but they got close, and we jumped off and tried to find a place to hide and get in, and we were surprised because we wasn't fired on at all. And but then we went on to another hilly area, kind of overlooking Way, and that's where I was stationed until.
Did you go to Khe Sanh?
Yeah, I did. It was actually it was close to Khe Sanh where I was. Yeah, and anyway, I was there. We kind of set up our perimeter and all, and we were taking all kinds of mortars and rockets coming in, not like Conti but still. And I was so close to going home that I was saying, "Come on, guys, it's time to get me out of the field." I think I had I think it was like 13 days left when I finally got out of the field, and I got to come home a few days early. I think I was scheduled to get out on the 24th. Got out on the 14th, I believe is the way it was, and
You have to tell about leaving.
yeah, that was another exciting time when I tried to leave. We were ended up at Dong Ha, where there was an short air terminal there, and me and a couple other guys, so we were trying to get out. We were talking to the person that was in charge there, and they said, "Well, you know, we're just trying to get all the wounded out of here, so we don't have any places." I said, "But there is a helicopter if you might be able to get." So told us where it was. So we went over and got this guy to take us in the helicopter, but we didn't get very far. It got up in the air and it wouldn't go anywhere. And he just come right back down to the ground. And he said, "Well, guys, I'm sorry. I think we've got too many bullet holes. It won't go anywhere." I don't know if that was the case, but that's what he said. And so we went back down, begging this guy, we got to get out of here somewhere or another. And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what, if y'all will help carrying the wounded out to the C-130, then you can ride out on it." So we started carrying, well, we were carrying this one guy, you know, he was on, yeah, he was hurting. He had IV and all, and, you know, one carrying the bottle, two of us carrying him. And as we got out on the terminal, the plane started taking off because they were getting incoming fire, mortars and rockets. And we were thinking, we're not going to get to that plane. So we just took off running, and we got there. We just threw that poor guy in, and then we jumped in. And as the plane was lifting off, the rocket hit so close to the back that it damaged the tailgate. But it got near, got us out of there, and we landed in Da Nang. And when we got there, we had turned in our weapons and everything. And they said, well, guys, we're expected to get overrun tonight, or they're going to try to overrun. So they issued us rifles, put us back out on the line. And we were out there about half of the night, and they come out and said, well, looks like it's not going to happen. So y'all can turn in your weapons and go find a place to bunk. And so we went and found this, there was just several shacks around, and we found this one that had cots in it. And we just sacked out in there, and we were supposed to leave the next morning at 8 o'clock. And it was about 3 or 4 o'clock when we got in there to sleep. And next morning I woke up, I looked around, I was the only one there. I thought I missed my flight home. So I grabbed my gear and my clothes and took off, ran over to the airport, and we didn't leave for another 3 or 4 hours. But I sure thought I'd missed it. Yeah, and from there, I ended up in Hawaii. They had to stop over in Hawaii, and we went in there and had drinks. I think it's the last drink I've had. And then on the way to El Toro, California, they told us, if you guys got anything from Vietnam, you're not going home. And so guys started ditching whatever they had. And I really didn't have that much, because I had a buddy that had been wounded 3 times, but he was still in country, and he was in supplies. And on my way home, I stopped off there, and we visited, and he said, was there anything you'd like to take home? And I said, well, it'd be nice to have some jungle boots and poncho liners and stuff like that, you know. So he fixed me up a box and said, well, I'll ship it to your house, your home. I never did get it. I never did get it. That's a good thing, I you know, because that's kind of like stealing, I guess. And but anyway, from El Toro, as I was preparing to go home there, getting everything in order and even putting on nice uniform, and I had on a nice khaki uniform, and I had time to burn. I said, well, I'll just go over and get me a Coke or something, you know, at the club. And on my way over there, this truck passed by and backfired. It'd been raining, and I was in the ditch and muddy again, because I thought I was back under fire. And then, but just in I don't know, a couple of days, and I was on my way home, and landed a little place in Bedville, Arkansas called Drakefield. And that's where my wife and twin daughters greeted me. And I tell you, we call it the best day of our lives.
Absolutely. It is the best day of our lives.
Getting to be together again and getting to see my daughters, you know, and it was just awesome. And you might tell them how you ended up at the airport.
Well, that day about early morning, it started snowing. I may have told you this. I can't remember.
You have not? No, ma'am.
No? Okay. Well, anyway, I had told my mom and dad I was going to take the babies and we were going to meet Derl, you know, at the airport, but we wanted to meet him by ourselves. You know, I just wanted it to just be us for the first little bit. His mom and dad were coming over and to be there when we got back home. And it started snowing, and it snowed, and it snowed, and it snowed, and he wasn't coming in till 11 o'clock at night.
Right.
But about 10 o'clock, I got the babies up, got them dressed, and mother and dad were just, they were saying, it's really bad. We just don't want, I said, I have waited this whole time. It's been over a year since I've seen him. I want to do it. And finally, they just quit. They didn't say anymore. And so anyway, we got all dressed, got them in the car, and I took off. And the roads were, you know, pretty treacherous, but we got to Drake Field, and that was back when you could pull up to the terminal. I mean, you know, you could just go right in, and you were there, and you were looking out at the tarmac. You know, it was a small airport.
Yeah, it's about 30 miles away.
Yeah. Anyway, I took one of the babies. I just pulled up to the door, left the car running, took one of the babies inside and set her down, ran back out, and there was my dad and Derl's dad holding the other baby. And they said, we just followed you, just wanted to make sure you got here, and we're leaving, we're going back home. And so I took the baby and put her down beside the other one. And as I did, I looked up and saw the plane pulling in, and then I saw Derl at the top of the steps, getting, you know, as they opened the plane. It was so sweet. And I just ran out. I forgot I had babies.
Yeah, and I was so quick getting off the plane that I forgot my bag. So I had to run back on the plane and get it. And I was still the first one off.
And when we came in, there were a big circle of people around those babies. You know, it was obvious what was happening. You know, he was in uniform and brown as a gingerbread. And anyway, it was so fun.
Yeah, it was a good homecoming, not like a lot of the guys, you know, had to endure.
Experienced, yeah.
Yeah, ours was good.
Yeah. And you got to see the girls for the very first time.
Oh, yeah, it was awesome.
Well, I'm not a dad, but I'm sure that as a father, that's a beautiful experience you can't forget, of seeing your baby for the first time.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Especially just not knowing if you're ever going to see them, you know, and then getting to see them. It's really a great experience.
Well, it was fun.
And it brings up one of the last little questions I have here, is that, Marilyn, being that you were at the home front, were there a lot of anti-war protests going on around this time of late 67, late 68 in Arkansas? Did you see that?
No. You know, we just didn't have that much of that. If it was happening, it was pretty quiet, because we never saw anything like that. And just like the people that were in the airport that evening, you know, they all had smiles on their faces. You know, it was like they were joining in with us.
Yeah, I've heard that there were some around Fayetteville and Little Rock, but nothing like you see in the bigger cities. Yeah.
Like out in California, you know, they were having such big riots and rallies.
Yeah, yeah.
But we have heard, after we started going to the reunions, hearing what these other men experienced coming home, and it made me very sad.
Yes.
It was.
Some of them really had a hard time. And there were fights. I mean, because people were calling them all kinds of names, and some of them didn't take it too lightly.
Lightly.
But yeah.
Well, and they said awful things to them. And here they were trying to do only what they were called to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of them were instructed to, told, said you might want to take your uniform off, you know, before you
get off the plane, put on something.
Right. And some did, some didn't.
But that wasn't our experience, even after you came back.
No, that was the privilege of living in a small town.
Definitely. I've talked to Marines who were on both sides of that, of having an experience like you both did that was welcoming, and then also on the flip side of people being called names, and even Marines having people try to fight them after going home. And so I find it very peculiar of depending on where you're from, that's generally how people acted. Some places out in California, down south, it's just a totally different world.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you know, I knew that people were against the war, and I knew that just from talking to some, I could tell they wasn't interested. They didn't want to hear about it, and so I went like 35 years. I didn't even talk about it, just because I knew it wasn't accepted, and it was difficult. I mean, I even had after I had an interview with the newspaper. I don't know why they picked me, but they came by and wanted to do a profile page.
We told him that.
Yeah, I guess, did we tell you that?
Yeah.
And anyway, after it, when it came out, then I had my friends and coworkers calling wanting to know how come I hadn't told them. Well, I hadn't told them because I didn't think they cared.
Well, and look at you now. I
And
mean,
it was hard. It was hard to talk about it too at that time, you know.
But I remember thinking Derl went about 10 days. He was holding a rifle or a gun. And then about 10 days later, he's holding a baby or babies.
Yeah,
And
it's quite different.
there was no, what do you call it? There was no
Transition, yeah.
debriefing or anything like that. There was no, nobody talked to us about any of the issues of post-traumatic stress or anything like that, did they?
You know, the only thing the government told me was when you get home, go to the VA and have your teeth checked. So I did that.
well,
But I think the military does a much better job
Yeah.
today. I think they do a lot of counseling and helping them readjust. But you just think about that. You're moving from a battlefield to home in just a matter of days.
Yeah. And our veterans administrations, I think, are better at helping people now, because back then they didn't do much. But
They've improved.
oh yeah, tremendously.
well, I
Matter
like
of fact,
Go
we
ahead.
both volunteer at the VA now.
Wow, that's awesome.
So
Well,
And have for about 10 years.
I'd love
Yeah.
to.
And we have a really good VA here in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
we
I'd love
do.
to talk to you guys about that sometime, about volunteering for the VA and the impact it's had. But I like how you both highlighted the adjustment period, that there was none. You know, a week ago, like you said, Daryl's holding the rifle, he's in country, and then now he's holding children. And no one told you, did anybody tell you how to be a civilian again, Daryl, to go back to civilian life now that you're not in combat, not in the combat zone?
No, it was like you're done, so go back to being a civilian.
Yeah,
No,
that's incredible.
There was nothing. Yeah.
Well, and take this on out today. You've got that, but at the same time, you're still proud of your service because you go back to the reunion.
Oh yeah.
Now, do you still attend reunions today?
Yes. The first one I went to was in 2006, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I got out, I just quit it. I had no interest. And my brother-in-law Kenneth, which I think you talked to, he called me up and he said, "Hey, they're having your company, your battalion's reunion over at Branson, which isn't very far away from us, Branson, Missouri." And he said, "Are you going?" And I said, "No, I'm not interested." And he said, "Well, are you sure?" He said, "I think you ought to go." And so he said, "I'll tell you what, if you'll go, I'll bring my wife and you bring Marilyn and we'll go." So we went, and I was so surprised. I enjoyed it, and I went to every one since then, every other year. And we have different locations, you know, like I think the next one's in San Diego again, and which is really, really fun. And
they didn't have it during COVID.
Right. We missed. That's the first time we've missed. Yeah, since then. So yeah, it's rewarding to meet up with your old friends and meet new ones, because it's the old ones and the new ones, you know. So of the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, and I think both of us have enjoyed doing it, and it's worked out pretty much for us every time. And we still, there's a couple of them that we stay in really good contact. Well, 3, I guess. One of them was a guy that was in my section, my mortar section, and I was at work one day, and I just thought about him because we were buddies, and so I got on the internet and I sent a message out about there were his name, which is a very common name, so I got several replies or several places. So I picked out, I think, 3 places where I thought he might be, and I sent a message. I said, "Is this John Gunning?" I said, "Is this a John Gunning that I served with in Vietnam?" And I bet it wasn't 5 minutes. He replied back, and then, well, actually, he called me. I don't know how he did it, but he called me and we talked.
You were at work.
Yeah, I was at work, and then later, when Marilyn retired, we got a free trip to New York City, and he's in New Jersey, and so we decided we'd get together, and we did. It was a great reunion.
It was very touching for
yeah.
them to see each other for the first time.
It was
40 years.
Yeah, and then there's one a corpsman that was there in Conti, and he wasn't now in Operation Buffalo. He'd had some kind of medical something that held him back. And of course, the corpsman that took his place was killed, so he felt bad about that. And then another guy that I was in boot camp, ITR. We went to Cuba and together, and then we went to Vietnam, but ended up in the same division and battalion, but different companies. And we connected from that first reunion. And so we stayed connected ever since. You know, he lives out in California, and they visited us here, him and his wife. We visited them there. So, you know, we made some connections throughout the years. Yeah.
That's what got me into interviewing Marines seriously, is that 2.5 years ago, I was fortunate to be invited to attend a Marine reunion in North Carolina for Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 4th Marines. And I've struck up great friendships, but that opened the door of me wanting to talk to other Marines. And so I've done that. I've been to San Diego to interview Marines for reunions. I've had a blast.
Wow.
Oh, good.
Wow. Well, tell me, why are you doing this? You just enjoy doing it?
I enjoy doing it, first of all, but I also use this in my classroom. Whenever to cover Vietnam, or whenever I host a little military history club at the high school, and a lot of it is centered around Vietnam. And instead of me talking and teaching about Vietnam, you know, I can pull in your story, of our interviews and what I've done with other Marines, because I think it has a hell of a more of an impact, pardon my language, than me just talking about Vietnam. Bring in the actual person who was there.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, and you know, I speak at schools and things now, and veterans events and civic clubs. And I would never do that before my book came out. But anyway, we are amazed at the way the kids listen.
And how interested they are.
It's like Vietnam. They never heard it, you know. And
I brought a combat photographer to come speak at the high school, and we've got 1,800 students or so, and staff included. And there was probably 300 students and teachers that came in the auditorium, and he brought a slideshow of 67 of his pictures that he took when he was in country. And you could have heard a pin drop when he was telling his stories, because the kids were so invested. I was really impressed by not just him, but the students and how they acted. And it really got me thinking of bring these interviews into the classroom, because it's that personal connection.
Yeah, and that's the way
been our experience. Yeah.
I was so surprised. I'm thinking these kids,
so quiet,
you know, if they just straighten up and start listening.
Well,
And afterwards, we've had a lot of them come and want to talk, you
Mhm.
know, and
Mhm.
ask other questions or buy a book or
Yeah.
something.
Right.
But
well, I mean, and with that, to continue this aspect of the connection and the impact we're making, with these interviews, I've been I upload them to YouTube. That way other people can watch them. I think one of yours, Derl, has a, views, it's over 2,000 views of people who've watched it.
Wow. I'm out there, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's incredible. I'm fortunate here. So, I got a phone call. Give me 1 second, guys.
okay.
Oh, sure. All
Sorry about that, but
right. Hey, I wanted to ask you, is my
Go for
book in there? Is my book back there in that shelf?
right over there in the corner. Yep, I've got it. I've got it organized. If you can see, it's two big shelves, but it's organized from some books I had in college that I really enjoyed, and then it goes into its military history from the American. Well, it goes back to medieval warfare, but to the American Revolution, Civil War, World War One, Two, Korea, and Vietnam, and then
Hmm.
because I'm very anal about my book order, I've got it organized by branches. So for World War Two, the Marines and the Army are their own branch on the bookshelf, and it's that way. If you ever have a kid who's really interested, it's organized by section because that just makes sense in my head.
Yeah, you sound pretty organized.
Well, and what I do, a lot of these books I end up using in my classroom. When I have students doing research projects, or if I'm doing the military history club, I'll pull sections of the books for my students to read, where we'll read about a personal experience. We'll read perhaps a novel that was written by a veteran. We'll read an after action report and we'll compare them. You know, what are we seeing in these readings? I don't know if you ever saw Sea Tigers when you were in country. They were the Marine Corps newspaper that was published in Vietnam, and published weekly, detailed the actions of various operations. But I have probably 50 of those in my collection. I'll bring those in and I'll let my students read newspapers from 1966 to 68 about what the Marines are doing in Vietnam.
Wow, that's neat.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you know, our outfit was in Newsweek and Leatherneck magazine. I don't know of others. We had a news person there and a photographer, and they told us that it would be, told us where it was going to be and when you could see it. We never seen it. I don't know what happened to it or him.
Well, whenever we get done with this interview, after I turn the recording off, I want to talk to you about the Newsweek or the Leatherneck magazine because I collect things. I'd like to find a copy of that if I can, just because it's a cool personal connection I have with a survivor of Operation Buffalo.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, I can send you that information. I don't know where they are right now because we moved just recently, so everything's kind of here, yonder, and there.
Hey, take your time, my friend. We've got nothing but time. And then one of the last question I have for the Horn family today is that, you know, we think about Operation Buffalo. We think about you coming home after the war in itself, meeting your former Marine friends at reunions. How does it feel to know the impact that you both have had in this? You know, Marilyn, you helped with the book. Derl, you eventually we're doing this recording, you know, people are watching your interviews. What does it feel to know the impact you're having across Marines and young generations?
Well, I tell you, it's a good feeling. It's great to know that it's helped somebody else, and that's what I started. One of the things that I hoped this book would do is help other veterans. And I had a lady that I seen at the VA for counseling, and she actually used my book for some of her counseling to other veterans. I know she did because she asked permission to do it. And it's rewarding just to think that it might have impacted somebody else, you know, helped them. And when I meet young guys wanting to be Marines, I said, well, maybe you ought to read my book first. Or you may want to get in the field where you can get an education But if you just really want to be a fighting Marine, yeah, go ahead, you know. So yeah, it really is a rewarding. And then when I get compliments, I tell you that, Zach, I've got just pages of comments about my book, and there's 2 people that gave me a bad review. They said, you talk too much about your wife and your religion. And that's the only complaints I've had.
Well, and it's like, I remember when you first told me about the book, I actually read those comments and reviews, but that's your experience. That's
Yeah.
part of the story is Marilyn's perspective, but also, you know, your wife and your faith, they're incredibly important to you. I mean, that's
Very important.
you relied on in country still now, and it's a part of your story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
a very important part.
Yeah, we know to this day that the good Lord brought me back for some reason, you know, and hopefully it's to help somebody else and maybe encourage them, you know. So we'll just.
And he gets opportunities to do that every Monday when we volunteer.
Yeah.
Because veterans talk to veterans.
Yes, they do.
And it gives Derl an opportunity to share. You know, there is ways to cope with that stress other than alcohol and drugs. And drugs. Yeah.
Yeah, and I encourage them to talk about it, to write about it, you know, because now I know how much it really helps.
Well, I'm glad that you made that that comment there of veterans talk to veterans. And I remember when I first started doing this seriously, or trying to get into it, a guy over a reunion told me, he said, you know, you're going to have to find a way to connect, because he said most of the time these guys will not talk to somebody who was not there or somebody who hasn't served. And so I found my way to connect of my passion for history, knowing what their company, their battalion was doing, just showing that I cared enough to know about who they were. That made a difference.
Right.
And that opened up the doors. And a lot of people don't understand that, you know, it's not that veterans don't want to talk. It's just, it's hard to perhaps talk with somebody who hasn't been there, because what do they know?
Yeah, you realize in your mind, you think they don't understand, you know, so why talk about it? But I'm finding more and more that people are interested and do understand to a point. And yeah, I talk to veterans a lot that have never talked about their wartime experiences. They just can't handle it, and they don't realize that if you get it out, it makes it a whole lot better. And now I'm pretty free to talk about it. Now I may end up tearing up, you know, at certain places, but
Right.
And like I tell the people when that happens and I'm talking, I say, y'all know Marines don't cry, but sometimes our eyes sweat. That kind of breaks it up for them and for me, you know. But yeah, there's certain things that just kind of touch your emotions still, even after 50 plus years later.
Well, and I believe that's a very poignant reminder of the impact of what your 10 months in Vietnam had on you. And every Marine, Army, soldier, sailor, and airman who served in the conflict in itself, it's important to know that this is still the impact, that, you know, it never leaves you.
Right.
Sure.
Yep. You want to say, oh, it's all in the past, forget about it. But that doesn't happen. It's there, and I know it's going to continue being there. Just hope I can get it clouded over a little bit, you know.
Well, you've done a fantastic job of confronting that with, you know, our interviews, but with your books, and like you said, or your book, and like you said, that's opened up the door for you. That's helped you.
It has very much, very much.
We want to thank you too, Zach, for having an interest in this, and also teaching young people too. You know, I think that's so important.
Yeah.
I thank you, but I'm nobody special. I'm just a nerdy historian who likes to ask. I just like history. But thank you. That does mean a lot. I've always tried to be the history teacher I didn't have, of making history engaging, but bringing it to life in the classroom.
Mhm.
And doing this with Vietnam veterans is that, because I had a friend of mine tell me that for him and I growing up in the late 90s, we looked up to World War II veterans. And
Mhm.
now for this generation of teenagers, well, they look up to the likes of you, Derl. They look up to the Vietnam
Mhm.
veterans. That's the comparison there. And the more of these stories I can record, the better off I'm perhaps making the world of understanding what Vietnam was really like.
Mhm.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. Yeah.
Yes.
You're doing a good job, and you're a good interviewer. You make me talk. I'm not a big talker.
Well, I think
Well,
Marilyn
I've
helps a
learned
bit there
some new
too.
things.
Really?
Yes, as I've listened, because it's brought you ask questions that we've never heard
Mhm.
before.
Well,
Yeah, it's like when we got the book, working on the book, Marilyn said, "You didn't tell me this stuff. You didn't tell me."
Um,
So yeah, she is learning.
well, it's always a pleasure. You two brighten my day. I find it wholesome and beautiful that Marilyn's done these interviews with you. And we actually got to bring her in. I think that's a really unique perspective for today that often is forgotten of what do people at home go through in this time period.
Yeah.
So, Marilyn,
absolutely.
you're also an invaluable source of information and aid as well.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
She's my rock. So I think I'll keep her. She's my real hero.
Gracie says hi to Zach.
Oh, hi, Grace.
She's been quiet all this time.
She's she's my service dog. She's a good one.
Now I can tell. She's cute too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
won't,
she doesn't look like a service dog, but she is.
hey, whatever works, right?
Right.
Yes.
Well, I won't keep you guys too long. Marilyn, thank you so much for your input today.
Sure.
Darrell, thank you for your service and welcome home, my friend.
Well, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you, Zach.
Thank you, guys.
Keep in touch.
I always will.